Hello, and welcome to BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Sydney Boles. The MBTA Communities Act has been big news in Massachusetts as more than 100 communities scrambled to comply with new zoning rules set down by the state. Here in Burlington, our task is to create a zoning district of about 50 acres where developers could, by right, build multifamily housing of at least 15 units per acre. And we have until the end of December to do it. The conversation around this new law has raised issues of local self-determination, Massachusetts' housing crisis, and what denser housing should look like here in Burlington. A warrant article with Burlington's solution to the MBTA Communities Act is coming before town meeting in May. I wanted to understand how we got to that article and what it could mean for the town. So I sat down with Burlington's planning director, Liz Bonventre. And I wanted to know how some of Burlington's stakeholders would view these decisions. Rick Parker is the president of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce, and he says housing is a business issue. He was on Liz Bonventre's MBTA Communities Working Group. I started by asking Liz to define the MBTA Communities Act in detail.
The MBTA Communities Law was passed in 2020 under the Baker administration, and the requirement is that any community that is within the MBTA catchment zone, so that means communities that have rapid transit, have commuter rail, have bus, and are adjacent to communities with MBTA service, need to have zoning in place that allows multi-family housing by right. That multi-family housing needs to be at a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. And also the minimum district size for that type of zoning needs to be 50 acres. The requirements are different for if you have, subway service versus commuter rail service versus bus service versus adjacent service. And so we fall into the adjacent community category because we have buses. So we just have different requirements that are lesser than, say, communities closer to Boston or communities that have a commuter rail station.
So to dispel some misinformation potentially, not really anything to do with getting more bus service, getting rail, anything like that. Nothing about actual transportation stuff, it's just in the name.
No, I have to admit the branding that the state did on this was not ideal. It's a state law that does not have anything to do with the MBTA itself. It doesn't have anything to do with creating more, improving service, unfortunately. All of that's happening separate. This is just the state saying we need to create more housing. The most effective way of doing it with the smallest carbon footprint is putting housing near transit, essentially. And so that's kind of how they have crafted it. So It is completely separate from the MBTA itself, but
and the other piece of misinformation here is not misinformation, but being clear is that we're not required to build any housing. We're required to create a zoning district.
That's correct. There is no requirement that any housing be built. We just need to meet, I call them performance standards. Zoning, law is for zoning performance standards that we need to add. And those performance standards are having one district that allows multifamily units by right, and that doesn't mean they can build whatever they want. They still have to come to the planning board, go through the site plan review process, adhere to all of our local bylaws, rules, and regulations. But it's technically legally a by right use. Right?
Okay. Rick Parker, president of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. Burlington has been working on, Liz's office has been working on how we're going to comply with this law for a while now. And you, as a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, have been pretty active, pretty involved in this. So what's the business perspective? Why is this something that you took an interest in?
Well, first of all, I thank Liz for asking me to be part of the committee. I've lived here all my life. I've been a town meeting member, but I represent the business community. And I think all too often in this town, we see that there's a somewhat of a disregard for businesses' role here in the town. We talk all the time about 2/3 of the tax revenue is created by the business community. And transportation and housing are the two top things that businesses are looking for in deciding where they're going to relocate or where they're going to stay. It's hand in hand with the decision-making process for those that are looking to expand, and post-COVID for those that are looking, where are we going to put the office? Because the days of Burlington was always very fortunate. We're at the intersection of 3 major highways, and it was location, location, location. Post-pandemic, with work from home, it's all about where will our employees go? If in fact they're not working from home, where will they go? What are the transportation solutions? And key to this is, where is the housing where our employees will be living? And that will determine where businesses will locate.
So essentially you're saying the business community is watching to see how towns, including Burlington, respond to this. And if we want to keep our town attractive, this is something we want to be paying attention to. Is that about right?
Absolutely. And, aside from the MBTA Communities Act, we're working with Liz and Melissa's Economic Development Office to look at the future of mixed use. And that's what these companies are looking for. Burlington was always attractive for location. Then we were attractive for the amenities that we had here. Now it's all about housing and transportation for the next wave of businesses.
So, Liz, the state has made it pretty clear that this is not something they want towns to do. This is a requirement, and they're taking it seriously. So talk about the carrots and the sticks that the state is talking about here.
Sure. So the state, this is a law that the town, and we're not, again, I just want to reiterate, we're not alone. All surrounding towns have to comply with this. And so the stick of it is that the state has said that if as a town you do not comply with this, you do not create an additional zoning area that allows multifamily by right, that you will lose access to major sources of grant funding from the state. And I would say that this town has been extremely, extremely lucky in the amount of grants that it has received, millions and millions of dollars. I think over the past 10 years, I think it's been something like 16 million. Grants paid for the connection to the MWRA water supply. They've helped with signalization on Middlesex Turnpike. There's big major infrastructure project funding that we could lose access to. Not to mention planning grants. So currently we're looking at a Mass Trails grant to kind of explore connections to the Minuteman Bikeway and how can we get Burlington access to the Minuteman Bikeway. And so, that type of thing is on the table. And so so I guess that.
So that's the stick, and then I guess the carrot is you get to keep those?
The carrot is you get to keep, I guess that's the.
Or do you remain eligible?
You remain eligible for those grants, and you remain in compliance with the law. Essentially,
Right.
It's
Does that seem fair to you, Rick?
Yeah, honestly, housing in Massachusetts has been a problem for a long time. Communities have been left to their own devices to handle that on their own. Charlie Baker saw that there was going to be something that needed to be done to move it forward. First, changing the zoning on housing to a simple majority versus a supermajority was a major step in the right direction. But the implementation of new housing, the creation of new housing, isn't happening at the rate we need it. Here in Burlington, we can see I've got children that are adult children that grew up, absolutely cannot afford to live in Burlington. When we look at that next generation, attracting the next generation, these are the people who are working in the offices or the locations here in Burlington. To have an option to work closer to home gets that person out of the car. It allows us to build things with less parking because people won't need the cars that they need now. Burlington has evolved over the years from a one-car family to being, in my instance, we had one car when I grew up. We had 5 cars when my kids were here. In order to get that to move away from that, you need to have additional housing options where people may or may not even have vehicles. And I think Burlington, what's different from Burlington from Milton is predominantly a residential community.
And just to interrupt, we're going to talk about Milton in a minute. This is the first town in Massachusetts that was flat out non-compliant with the law and is now facing all kinds of consequences, lawsuit from Attorney General Andre Campbell, a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, just wanted to
I just think Burlington has to think long and hard about how it signals to the business community. Again, being that 2/3 partner here, we need to know that Burlington is open to housing. And while the MBTA Communities Act is certainly not the end-all be-all, it does send a message. And we want to make sure that message is, we will do it in the right way, at the right time. We will comply with MBTA, but we're not going to stand up and say absolutely no housing in our community.
I mean, this is so interesting, Liz. I mean, you and I have talked, I've heard you talk about Burlington's broken housing life cycle. Burlington's not unique in this by any means, but, this is that idea that if you're an older adult looking to downsize, if you're a young family looking to buy your first home, there aren't a ton of options to go through that natural life cycle of the kind of housing that a person or a family might want over the course of a life. Does this help with that? Is this the right approach to that problem, or is this something else?
So that's a very loaded question. So as far as zoning policy and planning, as far as planning policy, I think that this is a little draconian. As a planner, I would like to be able to be a little bit more nuanced in the way that we approach it. At the same time, I think that this can help with that. And, the plan that we have come up with for addressing that does allow for an area where additional units could be built if developers, were to buy the property and wanted to do that with it, but is in no means the majority of kind of the plan for compliance.
So maybe to summarize, maybe to dig a little deeper, if I'm hearing you correctly, no, this isn't going to solve our life cycle housing problem. It's going to check a box with the state, maybe create some new units potentially.
I mean, there is still that potential there that it could help. I think ultimately it can help towards that. There is an area that we is in the zone. So we've created a zoning overlay district to address this, so that we are on top of existing zoning, we're adding additional rights to allow property owners to build multifamily by right. You can just go to the planning board to do it.
So we're going to dig into that a lot in a minute. I want to stay here for one more second.
Sure, absolutely.
With this interaction between the state and the town, Ricky mentioned Milton a minute ago.
Yeah.
Just to dig a little more into the background here, this is a town that
Can you fix your mic really quick? It sounds muffled.
Sorry about that. Does this work?
Count to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Perfect.
Do you need me to start over? What do you want me to do?
You can start from the question you were just about to ask.
Okay.
I'll be on you.
Okay.
Count to 10 in your head and whenever you're ready.
Rick, a minute ago you mentioned Milton. To set the stage a little bit, this is a town that was basically the first town meeting, I think, approved these zoning changes. There was then a referendum and voters repealed that town meeting article, which is pretty dramatic, pretty intense, and pretty immediately that town experienced backlash. They're now being sued. They're going to have to pay those legal fees. Liz, what do you make of that?
I think that this is so what the state has been doing has done, and the lawsuit with the Attorney General, they've also immediately lost grant funding that was actually going to go towards a seawall for them on the coast. So this everything that the state is doing has been said ahead of time. If you do not comply, this is what's going to happen. The state is following through. They are legitimately concerned that we are having a major out-migration of working families and people with who just can't afford to live here and raise a family. And so, they are sticking by the letter of the law. As for Milton, it's tough. I would also say that Milton is not Burlington. When I think of people comparing the two, it's like comparing apples and oranges. Milton has direct access to rapid transit and the T and Forest Hills and the Mattapan Trolley, and they have benefited economically greatly from that access. Therefore, the state has said you have this amazing access to the city, great access to these economic resources and jobs, so you have to do more. For Burlington, we do not have to do the same as a Milton. We have bus service. We do not have to put our new zoning overlay district anywhere near a bus station or on any transit line. We can put it anywhere in the town. We don't need to, it doesn't need to be as large. There's certain criteria that we don't really need to adhere to that they do. And I think we're just a very different community. You know, our tax base is mostly commercial. You know, anything that we've done for MBTA communities has stayed away from single family neighborhoods. So I think that to compare the two, I don't think we're at that level yet. And I don't think that, I hope we don't get to that level, quite honestly.
Rick's in question. What do you make of Milton? Any lessons there for us?
Well, as Liz said, we're totally different communities. When we talk about the stick and the carrot, it's been defined that you will lose opportunities for grant funding. You will also lose the attention. We're trying to, the MBTA is in a 50-year first redesign of their bus network, which is the only means that we have to take advantage of the MBTA. There's a new route that's been devised coming from Davis Square, which will run through Medford, Somerville and Medford, which will get us those workers that we need. However, the implementation, we're somewhere down the road, and that's going to be one of those sticks that if you're not in compliance, getting those new routes established will be way down the line. So we need to make sure as a town, because we are depending on the commercial sector, that we're taking advantage of those things, that we are at the table, we're complying with what they're looking for, so that we can say we would like to have that route initiated a little sooner. We've talked about transportation and housing go hand in hand with what the commercial sector is looking for. These empty parking lots are not a good sign. And I know that we hear a lot from residents about traffic. You're either the cut-through or you're the destination. There's going to be traffic in all of our communities. We need to make sure that we are the destination and taking advantage of that commercial tax base. So it's totally different from Milton, and we need to come across as we're serious about making sure we can maintain our commercial sectors here in town. Let's
change the topic a little bit. I want to talk about this working group, Liz, that you established,
Sure.
and Rick, that you were a part of. This was a whole bunch of people. It was a really pretty broad swath of stakeholders here: town meeting members, developers, attorneys, town government folks. Rick, you were a part of that working group. Walking into it, what did you think you were walking into, and how do you think it went?
Well, what I thought I was walking into was exactly what we were walking into. It's the planning board and the economic development office have done a great job of knowing the players that you need to get in the room so each can hear from one another what their concerns are. The true battle here is that compliance is due by the end of the year. It has to get through town meeting. We've got a May town meeting coming. We're hoping to present it, hopefully to get it passed there. If not, you go to September, but the deadline is coming. So seeing the whole process is we're not going to solve the housing problem with this, but we do need to get it past town meeting. So there were town meeting members there, members from the planning board, members from the business community, understanding that the target goal there from it is to be able to come up with a plan that will be palatable to town meeting and educate the greater community. I think with a representative town meeting, it's important that those town meeting members are letting the residents know exactly what's going on. Most of the residents here, they live here, they work here, their kids go to school here, but they don't really understand a lot of these things that are going on. And then they see it on the news and understand other challenges in the communities. I think that Liz and her group did a really good job of getting the right people in the room so that people can listen to each other and understand the challenges.
Yeah, Liz, what was your thought process in the specific group of people that you put together?
So my main thought process was kind of two criteria. The first is that I wanted to have a diverse group of people. So I wanted to have people that are extremely pro-housing. I wanted to have people that are kind of don't want more housing in town, people in the middle, to really hash it out and see both sides. I also needed people, because this is, in essence, compliance is actually kind of a zoning jigsaw puzzle. The state says you need to meet these criteria and you need to have this type of zoning language. So people that had a little bit of base knowledge of how zoning bylaws work and how how that process works and how that sausage is made a little bit.
You needed it to be kind of a high level conversation.
Exactly. We had to move on from the state. How can the state overstepped? We needed to come up with kind of just be like solutions focused and hear from both sides, which
right.
I feel like we did. I thought the discussions were fantastic, and I really just want to thank everybody that participated in them. It was really great.
So, Rick, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm going to make this the Liz show for just a minute here. There's a lot that I want to get into. I want to really dig into the options that we considered. There is a plan, right? You all came up with a warrant article. The text is written for town meeting to consider.
Yep. There's a map. There's a zoning. There's a map that shows where we're going to put the zoning. There. Yep.
I want to get there, but I want to set the groundwork first. I really want to talk about why, like the thought process that led you there, the options that you considered that you didn't go with, and why, which is complicated. It's chunky, it's gritty. So
it's wonky.
It's wonky. So we're gonna be a little bit 101, but also I want to explain some of this stuff. So walk me through the parcels that were an option and why.
So we started out. We essentially started out with, you need 50 acres and 15 units an acre minimum. Oh, you only have bus routes. It can be anywhere. So it kind of, everything was on the table. We knew first, we're not gonna put this in single family neighborhoods. It's not appropriate there, and that's really not where we want to concentrate this type of multifamily housing development in general.
I mean, if this is one thing that I've learned about Burlington in the time that I've been here, it's that people really love the character of our neighborhoods, the residential Burlington.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course. And so, as a planner, like, I respect that, and I understand it, and I live by it. And so, that's number one.
Yep.
Number two was, this is kind of this law does not allow a lot of nuance in it. You have to meet certain criteria. A lot of residents in town and people we heard on the working group said, we have built a lot of multifamily housing in this town. 30% of our housing actually is multifamily, which I think is so admirable. You are above your 10% requirement for the 40B housing requirement. You have many multifamily housing options in town. Why, the question is, why aren't we getting credit for those? We've done the work. We have added multifamily where other communities have not. So we wanted to address some of that concern. And then the other side of the concern is the spirit of the law, the spirit of what the legislature was doing in creating this law is to provide options for more multifamily housing to actually be built. So what we came up with was a plan that, again, we wanted to make palatable to town meeting, that, most of the properties that we are putting in an overlay district, so we're adding additional allowed uses. The underlying zoning stays the same. You still have your same rights, but these are kind of actually adding additional rights to your land. That most of them are going on existing multifamily properties to, again, get credit, right? Make people in town and town meeting feel comfortable, getting credit where they've been more progressive than actually a lot of other communities in permitting these multifamily housing developments. So, giving credit where credit is due. The second half is the spirit of the law. So we really looked at different properties where, where it would be appropriate to see multifamily housing actually go, and actually to see where multifamily housing could actually benefit the commercial sector and benefit the overall tax base and economy for the town. And so that is kind of what I feel like we came up with. It's kind of threading the needle of both sides, right? That's what I've been trying to do. You have your housing advocates, you have your anti-housing people, and so kind of threading the needle while also adhering to the law and the spirit of the law.
So the plan that you came up with this working group is several parcels of land. Most of them are, as you said, overlays on top of existing multifamily housing. This is a number of our apartment complexes in town, notably not the Lord Byron apartment complexes.
Correct.
I listened to one of the working group meetings that you all had. There was a lot of concern, actually, that if you placed an overlay on that district, you really could potentially see the displacement of some of the families that live there. And that was not included. So walk me through that.
Absolutely. So, we started out with everything on the table. That was talked about, and what the working group ultimately decided and came to the conclusion was that, Lord Byron is an older development. It houses a lot of workers and people. It's the only naturally occurring affordable housing in town. So what that means is that it can't generate the same kind of rents that the lifetime living apartments on 4th Ave do. So if you are a nurse at Leahy, or you kind of work in the kitchens at some of our fantastic restaurants, or you're working at the mall, or if you're working some of these jobs that aren't making you six figures, that's a place where you can live comfortably in Burlington. And that community and the people that live there are so valuable to us. So, because Lord Byron is an older, the property is kind of older, and, there is the potential for somebody to come in, buy it, and kind of displace people and build new. We did not want to provide that option to the development community. We wanted to keep that an option in town for, naturally occurring affordable. It's not, the state doesn't say it has to be, but just by its nature it is. That population is very important to how this town works.
I just want to jump in because normally it'd be seen, the business community would love to be able to go in there and put in housing for new companies coming in. We saw it also as really one of the only naturally occurring lower options for housing, which are critical. I mean, you look at a couple of years ago, we were coming with new solutions to get workers from Lowell to come down and work as a lot of service workers, a lot of home health aides. They're critical to the businesses here, and it's part of what's critical to Burlington that we have these services available.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to come back to you in just a second. I have a couple more questions on this.
Yeah.
Is this our way of saying we're going to put these overlays in, but don't worry, nothing's really going to change? And is that is that something that the state's going to look poorly on?
So that is the $1 million question. So this is a new law. I know that we are not the only community that is providing a plan like this. And it was important that the working group felt it was important that, not just by the letter, that we adhere to the spirit, which is why we did include space for multifamily housing to actually be developed. And so most of it, yes, it is that, but also there is an area where multifamily could be built.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Rick, I'm going to ask you to be our town meeting whisperer here. You were on town meeting. I know you go to a lot of them. Put yourself in the room, in the Fogelberg Auditorium here at the high school, 126 people trying to hash it out and figure out if this is right for Burlington. How do you imagine this being received? What are the pros and cons that you can imagine being hashed out in May when this comes before town meeting?
I think, first of all, when you look at politics, and it starts at the national level, it's shouting, it's I'm right and you're wrong, my way's the only way. It's important at town meeting, and I think Liz has done a good job of including the community. There was a community, an open meeting last night for the community to come and hear it. Listening is so important, and understanding that there is a housing problem. No one wants the state to tell them how to do zoning. But understand that the state is up against it with trying to remain competitive. And Burlington falls more into that class of those that should be listening and understanding that housing done right is going to be essential for Burlington to remain where they are with the commercial sector. It's I'd also just wanted to go back to the spot that we had put in for development is a spot over on Great Meadow Road, which would be a connection between the 3rd Ave parcel and the mall, a walkable connection that we've always been looking for. The geography of Middlesex Turnpike is difficult with the steepness of the hill going up towards the cinema area. The crosswalk is at the bottom of the hill, really not the safest place. If you look at that connection where we're talking about Great Meadow, if that was to be developed, certainly part of it would be connecting it down to the mall and make it more walkable, make one less car on the road. So I'd ask town meeting to listen with open ears, not come with your agenda. And it's difficult to do, but that's part of the responsibility when you're representing the town, to not only see the immediate impact of what it's going to have, but to look down the road to make sure that we're thinking about remaining competitive in the commercial sector so that we can keep that balance of residential to commercial tax base.
What do you think of, personally, what do you think of the sort of the compromise that was created with this warrant article?
I think for Burlington, this is a no-brainer. I mean, what Liz has done, she's protected those residents that say the state's not going to tell us how to do it. And the truth of the matter is there are plans through Melissa's office and Liz to have areas in the commercial sector that will be mixed use, that will allow commercial and housing to be there, which much more fit with what the businesses of the future are looking for. So I want to make sure that we don't send the message out to the state, we don't want to listen to you tell us what to do, but we want all of your grant money, we want an additional route for the bus, because the truth of the matter is you're sending a message that will be heard by the state, and not that they're keeping a list, but it makes it difficult when we go to those meetings saying we're looking to have a partnership with the state for its resources, and they say, well, partnerships work both ways. That's what it is. So to your initial question to town meeting members, please listen. Please listen to the experts. We hire professionals. Liz is very good at what she does. She understands what it's going to take to get this passed. So there has been a lot of thought process and a lot of conversation, and I think she's done a great job.
Thanks, Rick. I just want to plug, on that note of listening. So we did have a public information session last night, and we spoke about this. We're going to continue this discussion at the planning board meeting on the 21st. You can tune in live. It starts at 6:30. You can tune in on BCAT. You can
show up in person.
You can join on the WebEx through our town calendar. So there are many ways for you to kind of learn more. The planning office has a website dedicated to this. You can see the map, learn more. So if you go to the Town of Burlington website, planning department, we have a website dedicated to this. And then, as always, you're always welcome to reach out to my office. And planning@burlington.org is our email. We'll talk to you.
How's it been for you interacting with the community on this?
I hear both sides. It's actually, and I value it. I have heard, this is, just legally, this is an overreach. This is a legal overreach. How could they? To Liz, like, this is disingenuous, and we need more housing. And I'm trying to thread the needle.
Right, but that's sort of the argument that I've heard you making for it, is that this is as close to a compromise,
Yeah, I'm literally, that's what I'm trying to do. It's a compromise, and I think the best kind of compromises are where one side doesn't get all of what they want, the other side doesn't get all of what they want, but it's somewhere in the middle. And I've tried to be as pragmatic as possible, I think, is my goal here.
You've done a good job when both sides are equally loud and mad about how it's worked out. So you've done well, Liz.
Thanks, Rick.
So we're coming towards the end of our conversation. Sure. We're going to land this plane in the next couple of minutes.
All right.
I do want to ask, what happens if this doesn't pass at town meeting in May?
If this does not pass town meeting in May, we would need to regroup and figure out from town council how to go forward. Again, if in the room. Sometimes at town meeting, you can just read the room. If we feel like it's really going sideways, we can always postpone the discussion for September. It's not what I want to do, but do what you got to do. But I think that next step would be figuring out what is iteration 2.0 for September. The reason why I'm hopeful that we can kind of get this done in May is because not only do we need to get this zoning overlay and this bylaw amendment approved by the town, but then the state has to review it and has to accept it
by the end of December.
So we want to leave ourselves plenty of time for comments, and if for whatever reason the state reviews it, says, okay, this is fine, but these are like our minute notes where you have to do X, Y, and Z, I will have September town meeting to do that. What I don't want to have happen is if this ends up going to September, that then we need to do a special town meeting to kind of finalize it before going to the state. That's not what I want to do. That's not what I don't think town meeting members want that. So I'm trying to give us enough leeway to make it work.
Okay. Rick, you get the final word here. We have discussed here that this is not the only housing changes that Burlington is planning on making, thinking about making in the next, in the coming years. But this is part of it. So paint a picture for me, 10, 15 years from now, the zoning changes pass as written in the warrant article that exists now. What's different? What does Burlington look like?
I think in the commercial side of town, you will see small pockets where there'll be housing mixed on commercial first floor, housing above, which will allow for the workers of the buildings around there to be able to have options other than getting in a car to go there. If we are serious about maintaining that commercial tax base, that's what we have to evolve at. And we're in a very competitive market. There are others that are seeing this as the opportunity to take shots at those that have particularly been successful in the past. So we're looking to get rid of these islands of parking lots. And in order to do that, you have to have options where people can walk or bike and move around. We're very fortunate here in Burlington that the commercial sector is primarily totally isolated from the main residential sector. So we've got to have some allowances for additional housing within these pockets, and then eventually tie all these pockets together so that the one person, one car will be a thing of our past. And we've got the tools and the blocks in place to do that. And again, the MBTA Communities is not going to help with that at all. It's something we have to certainly comply with. But the future looks good for Burlington, and there's a lot of exciting things coming forward. We can't stand still. The days of, this was a farming community only 80 years ago. Look where we are now. The next generation of people who live here will not be in the same housing situation that most of us that have been here for our lives are in. And that's exciting to see what the next generation brings.
Rick Parker, President of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce, Liz Bonventre, Planning Director, thank you both very, very much.
Thanks you.
Thanks for having us.
That was my conversation with Burlington Planning Director Liz Bonventre and Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker. I want to know what you think. Email your thoughts to bcat@bcattv.org with the subject line MBTA Communities. I'm your host, Sydney Boles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.